All right, so strap in, everyone, because today we're diving into a story that's, well, it's still unfolding, really, and it's got all the makings of a real head-scratcher. We're talking about Boeing, Starliner, and this whole saga of trying to get back to, routine human spaceflight.
Yeah.
And it's 2024, right? We should be past this whole, nail-biting will-it-work phase.
Yeah.
But here we are.
Right.
You've seen the headlines, the delays, the technical issues, the whole 9 yards. But what we're after today is, well, how did we get here?
Exactly.
What's the story behind the story?
Mm-hmm.
And to help us untangle this whole thing, we've got our expert in all things spaceflight with us, ready to, well, go deep.
I'm happy to be here. This is one of those stories that the more you dig in, the more you kind of go, hang on, what?
Oh, absolutely, which is why we're here. So first question, and it's a big one. We're talking about Boeing.
Mm.
This is a company synonymous with, engineering legends, right?
Right.
I mean, Saturn V rocket, parts of the space shuttle, they've got the pedigree.
For sure, for sure.
So how do they end up in a situation where getting astronauts to and from the ISS, which should be almost routine by now, turns into, well, this?
It is wild, isn't it? And that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating, because you'd think with their history it'd be a slam dunk. But, and this is where things get really interesting, we got to rewind a bit. Back to 1997, big year for Boeing. They merge with McDonnell Douglas.
Huge.
Huge aerospace deal, right?
But
on paper, powerhouse move.
exactly.
But, and this is key, when you look back at the historical analyses, even internal documents, you start to see a shift in Boeing's company culture happening around this time.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little, because we're talking about culture, not just nuts and bolts here.
Exactly, and it's crucial.
Okay.
So pre-merger, Boeing was known for this almost obsessive engineering first mentality. Push the boundaries, innovate, even if it meant higher costs, that was the name of the game.
Right, the best.
But post-McDonnell Douglas, things begin to, shift. Shareholder returns, hitting those quarterly numbers, cost-cutting, these things start to take center stage. And that's not necessarily bad in itself, but it does change how decisions are made.
It's like that restaurant everyone loves, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one known for amazing food. And then they get bought out, new management comes in, and suddenly it's all about turning tables faster, cheaper ingredients, portion sizes, the drill.
Oh, I know it.
The soul of the place starts to change, even if the sign out front is the same.
And that's a really good analogy, because that cultural shift, that's at the heart of understanding this whole Starliner situation, especially when you consider what Starliner was supposed to be.
Right.
This was the space shuttle's replacement, safely and reliably getting astronauts to and from the ISS. You're talking about human lives here.
High stakes, to say the least. Which makes what happened next all the more important to break down. Okay, so we're talking about a company culture clashing with, well, the realities of spaceflight, which are never simple. But let's get into the specifics here, because it's not just one thing that went wrong with Starliner, right?
Oh, no, not at all.
What gets me is one of the biggest challenges it faced was, well...
itself.
Yeah, pretty much. Or, to be more precise, how complex it is.
That's the irony, isn't it? You know how crucial redundancy is in engineering, especially for safety?
Absolutely. Got to have backups.
Right, but Starliner is almost a case study in too much of a good thing.
Okay, now I'm really curious. How does redundancy become a liability in space? That seems counterintuitive.
Picture this. Starliner has, get this, 52 individual thrusters.
Hold on, 52.
52.
That's not a spacecraft. That's like a fleet of tiny rockets strapped together.
It does sound like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And while each one has its purpose, some for fine movements, others for bigger course changes, having that many just introduces a lot of potential failure points.
Too many cooks in the kitchen, as they say.
Exactly. And in space, you really don't want a messy kitchen, if you know what I mean.
Not at all. A little too spicy up there. So speaking of things not going according to plan, let's talk about those Starliner setbacks, because it wasn't just one mission, right?
Oh, no. Each one had its own quirks, let's call them.
Quirks.
In 2019, during that uncrewed test, remember? Software bug.
Oh, yeah, the clock issue.
The clock. Seems minor, right?
Totally. Who hasn't had their alarm go off at the wrong time?
But in this system, with dozens of thrusters firing in sequence being 11 hours off.
11 hours.
11 hours off is like trying to conduct an orchestra when everyone's sheet music is scrambled.
Total chaos.
Precisely. Firing thrusters at the wrong times, wasting fuel, couldn't reach the ISS.
So one tiny error snowballs into, well, missing your orbital rendezvous.
And that right there is the thing about complex systems. Even a small hiccup can cascade into a mission-critical failure.
And in space, failure isn't just like an oops, gotta try again.
It can be catastrophic.
Exactly. Okay, so software glitches, check. But then there was the hardware itself too, wasn't there?
Oh, yeah, we can't forget about the valves.
The valves, right, during a later test.
13 of them stuck shut.
13. See, now that just sounds like bad luck.
Well, it turns out not entirely. Corrosion, that was the culprit.
Corrosion on a spacecraft. That's almost more unnerving because it seems so, I don't know, mundane.
You'd be surprised. Moisture in the system, probably during manufacturing or assembly,
Really?
reacted with the propellant, basically glued those valves shut.
So not just a technical issue, but like a quality control thing too.
In a way, yes. And what's more, it speaks to communication breakdowns. Boeing wasn't making every single part in-house, right?
Right, contractors and such.
Exactly. Aerojet Rocketdyne for the propulsion system.
Ah, so another layer of complexity.
And somewhere in that chain, information got lost, warnings weren't heeded.
The classic, but did you tell the right guy about the thing?
Something like that.
Oh boy. Okay, so software, hardware, communication. But this is spaceflight. We're talking about human lives here.
Mhm.
And there's still the crude mission attempt. That's where things get really, well, tense.
Oh, you're talking about the helium, right?
Yeah, the helium.
Hit
Helium,
it.
which always sounds so bizarre out of context.
Dirty balloons and squeaky voices, right?
Exactly. What's IT doing in a spacecraft?
You'd be amazed at how versatile helium is. It's crucial for pressurizing fuel tanks, provides the force to push fuel out, fire those thrusters.
Right, makes sense.
But on Starliner, there was an issue with a Teflon seal, the one meant to contain the helium,
The seal.
expanding under heat, restricting flow, and causing those thruster shutdowns during the crude attempt.
See, this is what I mean about spaceflight.
What's that?
It's like the most advanced engineering humans can do. But then something as simple as a seal can throw the whole thing off.
It's humbling, isn't it?
It really is. Makes you realize how much we take for granted here on Earth with gravity and air and all that. But, okay, we've talked about the technical stuff, the near misses. But there's another aspect to this whole saga that I think is really important.
What's that?
The money. Because spaceflight is expensive, we all know that. But this Starliner situation, it feels like the financial side of things is almost its own story.
Oh, absolutely. You can't separate the two. Not really.
Right. So let's talk about the elephant in the, in the spacecraft, I guess, the money.
The elephant in orbit. I like it.
Right. So we're talking billions here, which for most of us is like unimaginable. But in the world of government contracts in aerospace,
They
that's...
build a ballpark, yeah.
So how does that play into what happened with Starliner?
See, to really grasp this, we got to talk about contracts, the nitty-gritty of how these deals work.
Okay, contracts 101, I'm ready.
So Boeing, historically, they were used to cost-plus contracts with NASA.
Cost plus, meaning?
Basically, they do the work, government covers the costs, plus a bit extra for profit.
Which, given their track record, makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Saturn V, shuttle, that kind of history builds trust.
Exactly. But Starliner, this was different.
Okay.
This was part of NASA's Commercial Crew Program, and they wanted fixed-price contracts.
Fixed price. So set amount no matter what.
More or less, yeah, which completely changes the game.
So how much did Boeing bid to get Starliner off the ground? Literally
$4.2 billion.
$4.2 billion.
What a beat, yep.
And that's fixed. So any delays, cost overruns.
Comes straight out of their potential profit, which suddenly makes those delays very expensive.
Ouch. Yeah, I can see how that would incentivize, shall we say, a different approach
Right. And remember what we said about Boeing's culture shift after that merger.
toward prioritizing shareholder returns, cost cutting,
Suddenly, it's not just a cultural difference, but a huge financial risk.
because now they're on the hook for overruns, and
Yeah.
Boeing is a publicly traded company, right?
Exactly. Their performance directly impacts those shareholders, stock prices, the whole shebang.
So pressure's on to deliver on budget, even if things get, shall we say, a little delayed.
And that's where things get really interesting when you bring in SpaceX.
Right, their competitor for the Commercial Crew Program.
And they were awarded, get this, $2.6 billion for Crew Dragon.
Less than Boeing, significantly less.
And they've been hitting their targets, getting astronauts to and from the ISS without all the drama.
It's hard to ignore that kind of contrast, isn't it?
It really highlights the different approaches. You know, SpaceX, they're younger, more agile.
The upstart, right?
Exactly. Constantly iterating, prototyping, taking feedback, and adapting quickly.
Whereas Boeing, they're working with this, well, this legacy mindset, right?
Yeah.
Cost plus, where time maybe wasn't as critical.
And that difference in culture, in how they approach the problem, it really shows.
It's almost like, and maybe this is too simplistic an analogy, but like comparing a tech startup to, I don't know, a century-old bank.
There's some truth to that. Yeah, the pace of innovation, the tolerance for risk, it's all different.
And yet, both are trying to do something incredibly complex, which just goes to show
What's that?
there's no one-size-fits-all answer in spaceflight, just like in business and life, really. And sometimes the tried and true methods, they need a little shake-up when the stakes are this high.
Absolutely, and that's what makes the Starliner story so compelling.
Because it's not just about rockets and seals and software glitches, is it?
Nope.
It's about the choices we make, the pressures we face, and how those things can impact even something as monumental as getting humans to space.
It's a reminder that space exploration, for all its technological marvels, is still a very human endeavor with all the complexities that come with that.
Well said. And on that note, I think we've done our deep dive for today. We've gone from the nuts and bolts of thrusters and seals to corporate culture and the price of innovation. And I don't know about you all listening, but I'm feeling a little bit more informed, a little bit more aware of just how much goes into getting those spacecraft off the ground.
It's never as simple as it seems, is it?
Never as simple as it seems. And that's what makes it all the more fascinating. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. And until next time, keep looking up